OpenAI offers the United States government a massive $42 billion equity stake to buy political goodwill. Apple aggressively lobbies the White House to purchase memory chips from blacklisted Chinese manufacturers. And Microsoft commits $2.5 billion to embed thousands of its own engineers directly inside client companies. Welcome to this week's Rundown. I am your host, Anna. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today, we perform a forensic autopsy on the fusion of sovereign alignment and the subsurface hardware crunch for the week ending July 5th, 2026. The relationship between Silicon Valley and the state has fundamentally changed. Following intense political pressure, Sam Altman has offered the Trump administration a 5% equity stake in OpenAI, valued at over $42 billion, while simultaneously calling for a U.S.-led global AI regulatory forum modeled on the IEA. Anthropic has similarly negotiated a peace treaty, securing the partial revival of its Mythos 5 model for a vetted group of cyber defenders under strict Commerce Department oversight. However, behind this facade of sovereign alignment, severe infrastructure shortages are forcing hypocritical supply chain decisions. Faced with spiking hardware costs, Apple is currently lobbying Washington for permission to purchase memory chips from Chinese manufacturers that are explicitly blacklisted by the Pentagon. Before we break down the telemetry of these shifts, I have a brief strategic request. The algorithms governing your podcast platform dictate what intelligence reaches your feed. To ensure you never miss our weekly forensic autopsies, please hit follow or subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. It takes just 1 second, but it directly enables independent tech journalism. Let's unpack the data.
Imagine a teenager, right? And they are demanding the keys to the family car.
Okay, I can picture that.
So they sit you down, look you dead in the eye, and they promise they're going to drive safely. They even offer you like a 10% cut of their gig economy delivery earnings just to sweeten the deal.
Which sounds surprisingly mature for a teenager.
Exactly. It sounds great on paper, but what you don't know is that behind your back, they are relying on a completely blacklisted shady mechanic just to keep the engine from exploding.
Because they literally can't afford the parts anywhere else.
Yes, exactly. And that dissonance, that massive disconnect between the living room promises and the actual garage reality is the absolute perfect way to describe the current collision between the AI industry, corporate power, and just raw hardware reality.
It really is.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are stepping into a very specific role for you. We are acting as forensic venture strategists and sovereign technology analysts on behalf of the DJAMGAMIND Intelligence Network.
And our mission for this briefing is to perform a clinical, holistic autopsy on the shifting landscape from the week of June 30th to July 5th, 2026.
Right.
We're looking specifically at this massive theme of sovereign alignment and subsurface hardware dependencies.
And just to set the administrative baseline before we get into the weeds here, this deep dive is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, a professional engineer and founder at DJAMGAMIND from Calgary, Alberta in Canada.
Setting the stage. Perfect.
Yeah. So I want to start at the highest level of abstraction, basically the geopolitical casino, because the numbers being thrown around this week are, frankly, just staggering.
Oh, they are completely wild.
I mean, OpenAI has formally proposed giving the U.S. government a 5% equity stake in the company. But put that into perspective for us, because 5% sounds small, but we are talking about OpenAI here.
Right. You have to anchor that to their actual valuation. So based on the funding rounds from just 3 months ago, OpenAI was valued at $852 billion. Yeah. So that 5% stake, that is roughly $42.6 billion.
That's a massive chunk of change.
It's an unprecedented proposal. You have a private company trying to essentially grant a sovereign wealth stake to the United States government, just out of thin air.
It really feels like a corporate flex. And Sam Altman didn't even stop there. He followed this up with an op-ed in the Financial Times pitching a U.S.-led global safety forum.
Yeah, the IAEA comparison.
Exactly. He explicitly pointed to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which was formed during the Cold War to police nuclear weapons, as his blueprint for AI.
He also cited aviation and international banking regulations as precedents. The core argument he's making is that there needs to be an international referee, right, to decide who gets to possess and deploy the most advanced models.
And he's been taking this straight to the top.
Right. Altman has been actively discussing this framework with President Trump, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
But the political reaction is completely fractured. Like, on the other side of the aisle, Senator Bernie Sanders entirely dismissed the equity idea.
Completely shot it down.
Yeah, he countered with the demand for a flat 50% tax on shares of OpenAI, Anthropic, and XAI. And to be clear to you listening, we aren't taking a stance on which policy makes sense here. We're just impartially looking at the sheer variance in the response.
The spectrum of reactions is huge.
It really is. But it makes me wonder, why is the government so desperate for a leash right now?
Because the vulnerability of the digital economy is becoming undeniable. I mean, it's no longer just a theoretical white paper problem. Look at the Spotify incident from just a few days ago.
Oh, right, the Malcolm Todd track.
Yes. Spotify had to intervene and delete 500,000 artificial streams on its track called Earrings.
I saw that the song just spiked out of nowhere on the charts, but how does an AI bot streaming a pop song actually threaten the broader economy?
Because it's not about the song itself. It's about the financial derivatives attached to it. There's a prediction market platform called Kalshi.
Where users place binary bets on real-world events, right?
Exactly. And someone placed a massive bet, which was tied to a $3 million market, that this specific song would hit a certain chart position.
Wait, so instead of just hoping the song gets popular, someone essentially bought the outcome?
Yes. A trader actually flagged that the sudden overnight rise in streams had a 1 in 77 octillion chance of being organic human behavior.
Octillion. That's insane.
It is. The manipulator basically used cheap AI bots to inflate the streams just enough to trigger the payout on the prediction market. Spotify eventually caught it and dropped the song to 4th place, but Kalshi had already paid out the winners based on the manipulated data.
So using cheap AI agents to instantly manipulate binary financial markets, I mean, that is absolutely terrifying for regulators.
It's a regulatory nightmare. And the chaos isn't just in financial markets. It's in the underlying ownership of ideas. Midjourney is currently in federal court asking a judge to force Hollywood studios to hand over their internal AI training data.
Wait, studios like Warner Bros. And Disney?
Yeah, Warner Bros., Disney, Universal. It's a classic unclean hands legal defense. The studios are suing Midjourney for copyright infringement, claiming they scraped their movies to train the image generator.
Right.
So Midjourney's lawyers are essentially saying, well, we will show you our data, but only if you show us the internal AI models you've been secretly building.
Because they suspect the studios scraped the internet just like they did.
Exactly.
So literally no one's hands are clean here. But going back to OpenAI for a second, is this $42 billion equity offer a genuine attempt at national security? Or is it just, I don't know, regulatory capture dressed up as patriotism?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
Are they trying to buy the referee so the referee protects them from competitors? I mean, trading equity for regulatory shelter is a very old capital maneuver. But attempting it at a nation-state level is what makes this so unique.
Definitely.
As former White House AI advisor Dean W. Ball pointed out, the real structural question is whether this wealth is directed to households or simply absorbed by a government apparatus. But honestly, this top-down, boardroom-level geopolitical alignment completely falls apart when you look at the physical realities of the supply chain.
Which brings us back to our teenager and the blacklisted mechanic, because this is where the story gets incredibly hypocritical.
It really does.
Apple is currently aggressively lobbying the Trump administration for permission to do business with CXMT and YMTC.
Which is a huge deal.
Right. And for anyone who isn't deep into the semiconductor world, those are Chinese memory chip manufacturers, and both of them are sitting right on the Pentagon's restricted entity blacklist.
This is the raw hardware reality colliding with sovereign posturing. To understand why Apple is doing this, we have to look at the component constraints. The industry is facing severe mid-cycle price hikes and just massive global memory shortages.
And Apple really needs that memory right now.
Desperately. They're scaling up production for the upcoming foldable iPhone Ultra. They're targeting 10 million units, and this device requires huge amounts of onboard memory to run local AI tasks smoothly.
Hold on, let's break that down for a second. Why does an AI phone need so much RAM specifically? Why can't it just use a faster processor?
It's because of how large language models actually function. When you ask an AI a question, it has to load its model weights, which is basically its entire database of learned connections
Okay.
into active short-term memory
Yeah.
to generate a response quickly. If it doesn't have enough RAM, it has to constantly swap data back and forth from the slower long-term storage.
Which would make the AI unbearably slow.
Unusable, really. So Apple needs cheap, high-capacity RAM to make this device work.
And they can't get it anywhere else. I mean, this foldable iPhone Ultra is projected to cost around $2,500, with higher storage models hitting $3,000. You absolutely cannot ship a luxury device with laggy AI.
You can't.
Yeah.
And the traditional non-Chinese suppliers, Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, they're completely maxed out supplying data centers.
Wow.
So Apple, despite all the grand rhetoric about secure American supply chains, is literally forced to beg Washington to let them buy from the Pentagon's blacklist just to hit their production targets.
But doesn't that completely invalidate the whole sovereign AI narrative? I mean, we are talking about building these secure American walled gardens, pitching IAEA-style global security, but we literally have to ask the government for permission to build the walls out of blacklisted Chinese RAM.
It is entirely dissonant.
Yeah.
And the broader semiconductor industry is terrified that the government is going to make things worse.
So.
Well, the Semi Group, which represents the big memory makers, just sent a desperate letter to the White House begging them not to intervene in the memory market. Yeah, they warned that government intervention to try and control pricing or capacity will just break an already incredibly fragile system.
And you can see everyone else scrambling to cut dependencies wherever they can. I mean, Tesla just launched a $62,000 six-seat Model Y that integrates Grok AI directly into the car's system.
Right, hardware integration.
And SpaceX just demoed an XAI-powered phone prototype to IPO investors. It reportedly runs on its own OS and a Qualcomm chip.
Although, to be fair, Elon Musk publicly denied the Wall Street Journal report about the phone, calling it utterly false.
Sure, but from a structural standpoint, the strategic logic fits perfectly.
It absolutely does. It aligns with his goal of an everything app ecosystem that doesn't rely on Apple or Google's hardware. Even Anthropic is reportedly in talks with Samsung to manufacture its own custom AI chips, completely bypassing NVIDIA.
Because getting compute right now is literally a blood sport, and that compute scarcity is fundamentally altering how startups operate and how they are funded.
It's changing the whole VC model.
Look at NVIDIA's wild new partnership model. They are moving away from just selling GPUs for cash. Instead, they are trading compute power for a direct cut of a startup's future product and cloud revenue.
It is a radical shift in capital structure. They are partnering with companies like Sharon AI, helping them deploy 40,000 GPUs.
Right.
And Firmus Technologies, which is building a massive 170,000 GPU data center in Indonesia. NVIDIA is essentially acting as a shadow venture capital firm.
Because access to GPUs is just so tight right now.
Exactly. They can demand equity or revenue shares instead of just flat cash payments.
It's like a landlord during a gold rush realizing that selling shovels isn't enough anymore. So they start demanding a 20% stake in your gold mine just for the privilege of stepping onto the property.
That is exactly what is happening. And this desperation for hardware, it actually stems from a growing panic that the current method of training AI is hitting a wall.
The brute force method.
Right. Meta's superintelligence chief, Alexander Wang, recently stated that their new model, Watermelon, matches OpenAI's GPT 5.5.
Yeah.
But to get there, it required an order of magnitude more compute than their previous model. It is pure brute force.
So you just throw more data and more electricity at the server until it gets smarter.
Yes, but the returns are diminishing. In that same week, Mark Zuckerberg admitted that progress on autonomous AI agents is moving significantly slower than they hoped. Brute force simply isn't solving the logic problem.
But ByteDance's seed AI team thinks they found the way around the brute force trap, don't they? They published research on a new scaling law based on a benchmark called EdgeBench.
Yes, this is a critical divergence in how we train these systems.
Yeah.
EdgeBench involves 134 ultra-long horizon tasks.
Okay, what does an ultra-long horizon task actually mean in practice?
It means giving the AI an objective that takes at least 12 hours of continuous operation to solve.
Wow, 12 hours.
Yeah, requiring it to navigate unexpected errors, use different software tools, and actually correct its own mistakes along the way. ByteDance proved that if you let AI agents interact with real-world environments like this, their learning speed doubles every 3 months.
So instead of making the AI read 10 million books about riding a bicycle, you put it in a simulation, let it fall off the bike 1,000 times, and it learns the physics of balance naturally.
Precisely. It learns from environmental feedback rather than static data. And this shift is vital because the well of static free internet data is drying up.
Which brings us to Cloudflare.
Right. Cloudflare, the massive internet infrastructure company, is now actively prompting websites to block AI search indexing and data scraping by default. They're literally cutting off the hyperscalers at the source.
And while the American labs are fighting over data and compute, geopolitical competitors are moving really fast. Like, China's Kling AI just secured $2 billion to push global expansion right after OpenAI had to sideline its video generator, Sora.
They're seizing the gap.
Yeah, and ZAI is pushing its open-weight GLM models at vastly cheaper subscription tiers, aggressively positioning themselves as the budget alternative to American labs.
Which brings us to the hardest reality check of all. The enterprise implementation war.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Because let's say you secure the compute, right? You train the model and you launch it. The industry is rapidly discovering that handing a massive, incredibly smart frontier model to a Fortune 500 company does not automatically generate value.
No, it's actually creating a massive headache for these companies.
Right.
Microsoft just launched what they are calling the Frontier Company Program.
Right.
They are spending $2.5 billion on a small army of what they call forward deployed engineers, or FDEs. They are literally parachuting 6,000 specialists directly into client offices just to force the enterprise AI integration to work.
Because without hand-holding, the software just sits idle. Alex Karp, the CEO of Palantir, actually went on CNBC and delivered a scathing critique of this exact dynamic.
What did he say?
He argued that right now, enterprises are essentially paying for tokens that create no value. His argument is that the big AI labs are just absorbing corporate data to make their generic models slightly better without providing a bespoke, measurable return on investment to the actual business.
I have to challenge the industry logic here, though. If Microsoft has to spend $2.5 billion to deploy 6,000 engineers into companies just to make their AI usable, doesn't that inherently prove Karp's point?
It really does.
I mean, if the software actually worked out of the box, you wouldn't need an occupying force of engineers to show people how to use it.
It absolutely validates his critique. It is a very expensive admission that raw, generic intelligence does not equal specific workflow utility.
Right.
And compounding this implementation nightmare is a massive wave of security paranoia. Alibaba just outright banned all Anthropic products for their employees.
Even their coding assistant, Claude Code, right? Alibaba had a program that gave engineers a $1,400 a month stipend to buy outside AI tools, and they just slammed the door shut on Anthropic.
Because of an internal security audit, Alibaba developers reverse-engineered Claude Code from an April 2026 build.
And what did they find?
What they found was that the software was actively checking the computer's local time zone settings, as well as its API and proxy configurations, specifically searching for keywords related to Chinese cloud providers.
Wait, how does checking a time zone translate to a security threat?
Well, if a piece of code is designed to identify whether it is running inside a specific geopolitical region like China, it opens the door for remote manipulation. Alibaba views that as a potential sleeper agent.
Wow.
Yeah, even if Anthropic claims it was just experimental telemetry, Alibaba labeled it an embedded backdoor risk and just banned the entire model lineup.
It's basically the militarization of the code itself, which ties perfectly into the Mythos saga, where the U.S. Commerce Department had to lift the export ban on Anthropic's Mythos 5 model, but specifically only for vetted cyber defenders. The geopolitical borders are being hard-coded into the software.
And despite this friction, the tech giants are pushing for even deeper integration at the operating system level. Like, leaked images of Microsoft's Project Aeon show an AI-first Copilot OS that completely ditches the legacy Win32 codebase.
Okay, explain the Win32 ditch, because that sounds highly technical, but I know it's a massive deal.
Win32 has been the foundational architecture for Windows applications for decades. It's how your computer understands files and programs. Ditching it means moving away from a traditional file and folder system.
So what replaces it?
In an AI-first OS, the operating system is essentially a giant AI agent that manages your tasks dynamically, rather than you manually opening applications. Google is doing something similar. They are silently building agentic food ordering directly into the Android Google Maps app. The AI basically operates the app for you.
Okay, so if we look at the whole board right now, we have astronomically expensive compute, a completely hypocritical geopolitical supply chain, clumsy enterprise integration that requires thousands of engineers to fix, and deep, deep security paranoia.
It is a massive amount of friction. And that friction is exactly why the smart money is aggressively shifting away from bloated, generic models.
Yeah.
We are entering the era of the specialization mode.
The data on this is wild. Let's look at the research from Mira Murati's Thinking Machines Lab, or TML, which partnered with the hedge fund Bridgewater.
Right. This study is fascinating. They took an open source model, the Quinn3 235B, and fine-tuned it purely on expert-graded financial examples.
This is finance.
Yes, they tested it on highly specific tasks like filtering financial news and extracting investment sentiment.
And when they ran those exact same financial tasks through the massive generic frontier models like GPT, Claude, and Gemini, the accuracy basically hovered around 50%.
It was a coin toss.
Yeah, literally a coin toss. Even when Bridgewater's own top investors wrote the prompts, they could only get it to the mid-70s. But Bridgewater says that for an analyst to actually trust a tool with millions of dollars on the line, it needs to hit at least 80% accuracy.
And the specialized TML model hit 84.7% accuracy.
That's incredible.
It completely outperformed the massive generic models. But the technical victory isn't even the most important part here. The capital structure impact is the real story. TML achieved this accuracy at 13.8 times less cost than running the generic models.
Almost 14 times cheaper and significantly more accurate. So instead of thinking about AI like a giant public library where you have to wander around hoping to find the right book, businesses just want a dedicated personal tutor who already knows the exact syllabus.
That is a much better way to look at it. Companies are realizing they do not need a model that can write a sonnet code in Python and give them a recipe for lasagna.
Right.
They need a model that does their specific workflow flawlessly. Look at Anthropic's recent pivot. They are quietly developing their own drugs through a division called Claude Science.
I saw that. They're building wet labs and hiring biologists.
Yes, they are transforming from a general software vendor into a highly specialized competitor to Big Pharma.
So bringing all of this together, what is the final takeaway here?
If we synthesize everything from the past week, the overarching narrative of sovereign AI alignment is mostly a facade.
Yeah.
Talk-down equity deals and global safety forums look great in newspaper op-eds. But true power in the coming year will not belong to the labs with the biggest generic models or the closest ties to Washington.
Who will it belong to?
True power will belong to the companies that can navigate the physical reality of blacklisted hardware and deploy highly specialized, cost-effective models that actually generate measurable value without requiring an army of engineers to operate.
I think that hits the nail on the head. Before we go, if you find this custom deep dive valuable, the best way to ensure you don't miss our future briefings and to actually support independent tech journalism is to follow and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really makes a huge difference.
It absolutely does. Thank you for listening.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. As nation-states try to lock down these massive AI models with equity stakes, safety forums, and compute taxes, and as ultra-specialized open models become incredibly powerful and cheap, how long until we see a true black market for AI? Will we soon have untaxed, highly specialized foundation weights being smuggled on encrypted drives across digital borders just to bypass sovereign oversight? Because if the teenager can't get the keys to the family car and the mechanic is blacklisted, eventually they're just going to build their own engine in the dark.
That concludes our weekly forensic briefing for July 5th, 2026. The strategic signal for this week is the death of generic value. For the past 3 years, the assumption was that massive generic frontier models would simply consume the enterprise. The data from this week proves that assumption is dead. When Microsoft has to spend $2.5 billion to embed 6,000 engineers into client sites just to make AI functional, and when a fine-tuned open model from Thinking Machines Lab outperforms every single frontier model on Wall Street Analytics for a fraction of the cost, the era of the one-size-fits-all LLM is over. The organizations that will survive are the ones building highly specialized, proprietary learning loops, not the ones paying massive licensing fees for generic chat interfaces. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed by it, check the show notes for the AI Executive Toolkit. As a special asset for our global network, we have provided deep discount codes for Google Workspace and our premium AI and machine learning tutor, Pro Apps. You can claim those assets directly through the links in the show notes below. Subscribe to the DJAMGAMIND channel on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.